Everyone remembers the people outside the ark. Almost no one asks what happened to the beings whose rebellion helped corrupt the earth. The giants died in the water. Their fathers did not. According to the book of Enoch, before the first drop fell, the watchers had already heard their sentence. One was buried beneath jagged rocks in a place called Dudiel. Others were chained in the valleys of the earth until the final judgment. And when their giant sons died, that ancient book says something else rose from their bodies. Violent spirits condemned to remain upon the earth. But how much of that story is actually in the Bible? Did the flood destroy the Nephilim? Are the angels in the chains of Jude and 2 Peter the same watchers connected with Genesis 6? And are the demons confronted in the New Testament really the restless spirits of dead giants? The answer is not one easy theory. It is a trail running from Genesis, through a pre-Christian Jewish apocalypse, into three of the strangest passages in the New Testament. At the end of that trail, the flood is no longer only a story about water. It becomes the first scene of a judgment that is still waiting to be completed. The trail begins with a passage only a few lines long. Genesis says that when humanity multiplied upon the earth, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, took wives, and produced a world associated with the Nephilim, the mighty men of old. Then the camera of the text pulls back. Human wickedness becomes great. Every intention of the heart bends continually toward evil. The earth is corrupt before its creator and filled with violence. Those statements are clear. The identity of the sons of God is not explained. The origin of the Nephilim is compressed into a sentence. Their relationship to the judgment is never narrated scene by scene. Genesis does not name a commander of the rebellious beings. It does not describe chains beneath mountains. It does not say that demons emerged from dead giants. That silence is important, because many confident claims begin where the biblical chapter stops. Yet the silence also created a question ancient readers could not ignore. If heavenly beings crossed a boundary, if unnatural power entered human history, and if the whole world was swept away, did the judgment reach only the earth below? What happened to the beings from above? There are three major ways readers have understood the sons of God. Some see heavenly beings who rebelled and took human women. Some see the faithful line of Seth intermarrying with the corrupt line of Cain. Others see warrior kings who claimed divine status and seized women as an act of royal power. Each reading attempts to explain real features of the passage. The royal reading takes the language of taking wives seriously. The Sethite reading keeps the conflict within the human family. The heavenly being reading follows the ordinary use of similar language in Job, where the sons of God appear before the heavenly throne. This film investigates that third interpretation because it produced the ancient watcher tradition and because later Jewish and Christian texts seem to echo it. But examining a tradition is not the same as pretending the debate never existed. Genesis itself gives us the crime of a world, the violence of its inhabitants, and the judgment of the flood. The detailed prison story comes from another witness, one that was enormously influential long before the New Testament was written. That witness is 1 Enoch. For most churches today, it is not part of the biblical canon, although it remains scripture in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. It should therefore never be smuggled into Genesis as if the two books said exactly the same thing. But neither can it be dismissed as a medieval invention. Aramaic fragments of Enoch were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, demonstrating that forms of the book circulated in Jewish communities before the time of Jesus. The New Testament letter of Jude even quotes a prophecy attributed to Enoch, the seventh from Adam. This does not automatically make every section of 1 Enoch canonical for every Christian. It does prove that its world of ideas was known. 1 Enoch is best approached here as an ancient Jewish interpretation of Genesis 6, a window into how some readers before Christianity understood the rebellion. It takes the few mysterious lines of Genesis and opens them into a courtroom drama. A descent, an oath, forbidden knowledge, giant violence, a cry rising from the earth, and sentences pronounced before the flood. In the Enoch story, a company of heavenly watchers looks down upon the human world and desires what does not belong to them. They descend upon Mount Hermon and bind themselves together with an oath. Their rebellion is corporate, deliberate, and irreversible. The mountain becomes more than a location. It becomes the border where guardians abandon their appointed dwelling and enter a realm they were meant to watch, not possess. Their sin is not merely curiosity. They take wives, corrupt boundaries, and teach knowledge that magnifies human violence. One teaches the making of weapons and ornaments. Others teach enchantments, signs, and secret observations of the heavens. The text presents knowledge without wisdom, becoming an accelerant for pride. The Watchers do not create evil from nothing. Humanity is morally responsible in Genesis. But in Enoch, they intensify a world already willing to use power against the weak. Cold peaks give way to crowded cities. Workshops produce blades. Thrones become more brutal. The earth does not simply become advanced. It becomes proficient at destruction. Then come the giants. First Enoch describes enormous offspring whose appetite consumes the labor of humanity and then turns against living creatures and human beings themselves. Its scale is apocalyptic, not a neutral biological report. Genesis speaks more briefly, calling the Nephilim mighty men and men of renown, while immediately declaring that the earth was filled with violence. We must keep those voices distinct. Still, both place power beside corruption. The ancient imagination saw the giants not as harmless curiosities measured for entertainment, but as the visible architecture of a moral catastrophe. Strength without restraint becomes predation. Reputation without righteousness becomes terror. The world before the flood is not condemned because it built cities, forged tools, or possessed knowledge. It is condemned because every gift is bent toward domination. The ground receives blood. The weak have no court of appeal. And according to Enoch, the cries of the oppressed rise beyond the clouds until loyal heavenly messengers look down and ask why the throne of heaven has not yet answered. The answer arrives as a series of judgments. In First Enoch, a warning is sent to the ark builder so that a remnant may escape. Another messenger is commissioned against the rebel who taught humanity weapons. Another is sent against the giant offspring. Another receives the task of binding the Watcher leaders. Notice the order. The flood is not the first action in the Enochic courtroom. Before the waters erase the violent civilization, the heavenly rebellion is separated, restrained, and sentenced. The ancient story therefore imagines two theaters of judgment at once. On the surface, a family prepares a wooden refuge while a society continues as though tomorrow belongs to it. Beneath remote mountains and within dark valleys, beings once associated with the heavens discover that height offers no escape from justice. The coming rain will judge mortal life on dry land. It will not wash immortal rebels out of existence. Their punishment requires something more terrible than death: confinement, awareness, and waiting. The most vivid sentence falls upon the figure Enoch calls Azazel. A loyal messenger is told to bind him hand and foot, open a place in the wilderness called Dudiel, and cast him into darkness beneath rough and jagged stones. His face is covered so that he cannot look upon light. There he is to remain until the day of great judgment. This is not the picturesque prison of later fantasy. The text emphasizes deprivation. The teacher of weapons loses the use of his hands. The one who illuminated forbidden arts is denied light. The being who helped spread corruption across the earth is removed from the earth society and buried under its broken rock. Most importantly, this sentence is connected with the crisis before the flood. In Enoch's narrative sequence, Azazel is not surprised by the rain and then captured in the water. Heaven orders his confinement while the ark builder is still being warned. The prison closes before the world above disappears beneath the storm. The other Watchers receive a related but distinct sentence. Their leader and his companions are to be bound in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations, awaiting the final judgment. First Enoch portrays them seeing the destruction of the sons they desired and produced, unable to rescue them and unable to die beside them. This is the answer the book gives to our opening question. When the flood came, the rebel fathers were not swimming through the waters, hiding on mountain peaks, or boarding the ark. They were already prisoners. Their giant offspring belonged to the mortal catastrophe above. The Watchers belonged to a longer sentence below. Yet this detail must remain where it belongs. Genesis never names that valley or gives the number of generations. Those images come from First Enoch. They are ancient and significant, but they are not a missing paragraph secretly torn from Genesis. The proper method is comparison, not confusion. On the surface, the judgment reaches its terrible conclusion. Genesis says that the waters prevailed and that every breathing creature on dry land outside the ark perished. It does not provide a separate casualty list for the Nephilim. If they were embodied inhabitants of that world, The broad language of the chapter naturally includes them. But even here, precision matters. Genesis 6 says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. That short phrase has generated centuries of arguments. Some interpret it as evidence that similar giants appeared again after the flood. Some propose a later repetition of the same rebellion, a surviving line, a literary label for later warrior clans, or a narrator looking ahead to traditions familiar to Israel. The phrase does not tell us which mechanism produced the later giants. It does not say one particular Nephilim clung to the outside of the ark. It does not cancel the sweeping claim of Genesis 7. The text gives us a mystery, not permission to invent a survival scene. First Enoch takes the fate of the giants in a direction Genesis never states. It says that because their origin combined heavenly spirit and mortal flesh, their bodies would die, but evil spirits would proceed from them and remain upon the earth. These spirits would afflict, oppress, attack, and cause trouble until the final consummation. In this system, the flood destroys the giant body without ending the giant legacy. The fathers are chained below. The sons fall above. Their disembodied violence continues between those two judgments. That idea became one ancient explanation for the origin of demons. It answers a question later readers asked when hostile spirits appeared in stories without an origin chapter. If angels have bodies appropriate to heaven, why do demons seem desperate to inhabit and torment flesh? The Enochic answer is that they are not the Watchers themselves. They are the surviving spirits of the Watchers' dead offspring, beings that lost their unnatural bodies and now wander the earth they once devastated. It is a powerful theory because it connects several mysteries in a single line. Genesis 6 supplies the boundary crossing. The flood supplies the death of the embodied giants. Enoch 15 supplies the emergence of hostile spirits. The Gospels later show unclean spirits recognizing authority, fearing judgment, and seeking embodiment. The pieces appear to fit, but appearance is not proof. No canonical biblical passage says, in one unambiguous sentence, that demons are the ghosts of dead Nephilim. The Gospels do not introduce a demon by tracing its ancestry to a watcher. They emphasize what the spirits do and who has authority over them, not the mechanics of their origin. A responsible verdict must therefore say two things at once. The dead giant theory is genuinely ancient and provides a coherent map within First Enoch. It may illuminate the cultural world in which some New Testament readers lived, but it remains an Enochic explanation, not an explicit doctrine stated by Genesis or by Jesus. Then 2 Peter opens a door that looks remarkably similar to Enoch's prison. The letter says that when angels sinned, the Creator did not spare them, but cast them into a place of gloomy confinement and kept them for judgment. The Greek writer uses a rare verb related to Tartarus, a term used nowhere else in the New Testament. Many English translations simply render it as being cast into hell, but the image is not the final lake of fire after judgment. It is a holding place before judgment. In the very next movement, 2 Peter speaks of the ancient world and the flood, preserving the ark builder with 7 others while bringing judgment upon the ungodly. The sequence is striking: sinning angels, confinement, the ancient world, the flood. It sounds like the architecture of the Watcher story. Yet the apostle does not name Azazel, Herman, or Dudiel. He does not explain the demons. The echo is strong. The identification is still an inference. 2 Peter gives canonical support to the claim that some angels sinned and are held for future judgment. 1 Enoch supplies the expanded names, geography, and drama. Jude brings us even closer. He speaks of angels who did not keep their own position but abandoned their proper dwelling. They are kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. The language of leaving an assigned realm matches the central crime of the Watchers with unnerving precision. Jude later quotes a prophecy attributed to Enoch, showing direct familiarity with Enochic tradition. For many interpreters, the case is nearly complete. Jude knew the Watcher story and used it as a warning about rebellion, illicit desire, and inevitable judgment. Others caution that Jude's purpose is not to provide a complete commentary on Genesis 6. His examples are compressed weapons aimed at false teachers. Even so, one fact cannot be softened. In Jude, the rebellious angels are not free rulers of an underground kingdom. They are captives. Popular images often portray fallen angels sitting upon infernal thrones, administering punishment as if judgment had given them a rival empire. Jude gives the opposite picture. Chains are not crowns. Darkness is not dominion. Their prison is evidence that their rebellion failed. The strangest possible bridge appears in 1 Peter. After speaking of the suffering and victory of the Messiah, the letter says that he made proclamation to spirits in prison who had formerly disobeyed when divine patience waited in the days of the ark builder. Few sentences in Scripture have produced more disagreement. One interpretation identifies the spirits as the imprisoned watchers. After his death and victory, the Messiah announced triumph to the powers connected with the ancient rebellion. Another sees the spirits as the dead human generation of the flood. A third understands the preaching as the Messiah speaking through the ark builder long ago to people who were alive then but are now described as spirits in prison. Each view handles part of the grammar and context differently. The passage does not invite us to pretend certainty where faithful interpreters have disagreed for centuries. But it unmistakably places prison, disobedience, divine patience, and the days before the flood in one frame. Whatever the precise identity of the spirits, the final movement is victory. Authorities and powers are subjected beneath the risen Messiah. Now the pieces can be placed on the table without forcing them into a single book. Genesis gives the foundation, a mysterious boundary crossing, the Nephilim, universal corruption, an earth filled with violence, and a flood that removes breathing life from dry land outside the ark. 1 Enoch gives the ancient expansion. Watchers descend, forbidden teaching multiplies violence, giants consume the world, rebel leaders are bound before the rain, and the spirits of dead giants remain active. 2 Peter gives sinning angels committed to gloomy confinement and immediately remembers the flood. Jude gives angels who abandoned their proper dwelling, now chained until the great judgment, and it explicitly knows a prophecy of Enoch. 1 Peter gives disobedient spirits in prison connected somehow with the days when the ark was prepared, but leaves their exact identity debated. These are not identical statements. They are overlapping witnesses with different levels of authority for different communities. Honesty does not weaken the mystery. It shows us exactly where the rock ends and where interpretation begins. So what happened to the fallen angels when the flood came? The safest biblical answer is that the flood was not their execution. The canonical letters describe sinning angels held in darkness for a future judgment, while Genesis describes the destruction of life upon the earth. The fuller Enochic answer is more specific. The principal watchers had already been bound in subterranean places, forced to await the great day while their giant offspring were destroyed. What happened after the giants died? 1 Enoch says their evil spirits remained on earth. The Bible never states that equation directly. Were the spirits in 1 Peter those watchers? Possibly, and it is an ancient and serious reading, but not the only responsible one. Are the four angels bound at the Euphrates in Revelation the same beings? The text never says so, and similar chains do not make two groups identical. The verdict is therefore disciplined but dramatic. The water ended the world they corrupted, not the judgment they had begun. Their sentence extends beyond the flood toward a final court. That conclusion transforms the visual meaning of the ark. Above the dark forest, water rises, mountains disappear, and the wooden refuge passes over a world being unmade. Beneath it, according to Enoch's ancient vision, the teachers of rebellion sit in a darkness no flood can reach. They hear the collapse of the civilization they helped deform. They cannot return to heaven. They cannot rescue their offspring. They cannot escape into death. The ark is therefore not merely a boat above water. It is a moving line between mercy and judgment. 8 human lives passed safely through because warning was believed before evidence appeared. Mighty beings remain below because splendor did not produce obedience. The contrast is uncomfortable. Knowledge did not save the watchers. Strength did not save the giants. Reputation did not save the violent. Only refuge received by faith carried life through the judgment. And the story does not end with imprisoned angels. The New Testament turns the reader's eyes away from the prisoners and toward the victorious King. 1 Peter's disputed passage reaches an undisputed destination. The risen Messiah is at the right hand of heaven, with angels, authorities, and powers subjected to him. The point is not to make believers obsessed with the architecture of darkness. It is to announce that darkness has an expiration date. No rebel power is eternal. No hidden prison lies outside divine jurisdiction. No ancient violence has escaped the final hearing. The same patience that waited while the ark was prepared still reveals the character of mercy. Warning comes before closure, a door stands open before judgment, and refuge is offered before the storm. The question is not whether you can map every valley beneath the earth. The question is whether you will enter the refuge while mercy still speaks. The flood came, the giants vanished from that world, and the watchers, in the ancient telling, remained alive only to await their judge. But one word in 2 Peter makes the mystery even darker. It is used only once in the entire New Testament. Most translations hide its shape beneath the word hell. The Greek text says the sinning angels were cast into Tartarus. Was Tartarus a borrowed image, a literal prison, or the New Testament name for the same abyss described by Enoch? That investigation comes next. If you want us to open the gates of that prison, write Tartarus in the comments. Until then, remember the verdict already visible above the waters. Rebellion may endure for a season, but it never becomes sovereign. Judgment may appear delayed, but it is never absent. And when the door of mercy is open, wisdom does not stand outside asking how long the rain will wait.